Hello. So I thought we'd take a look at the restoration I did of the Lexicon 300 a while back. So it's a Lexicon and the LARC remote control. I've said before that many times I buy studio equipment that's not in the greatest of shape, and it means I have to spend a bit of time actually restoring, cleaning and making the equipment usable again. Now I must excuse, I've had a bit of a horrible cold the last few weeks, so my voice is a little more croaky than normal. So you can see this was probably the worst condition Lexicon 300 that I could find on eBay. It was a lot worse than it looks here on the camera. So the first thing I've got to do, of course, is power it up. This was a 120 volt unit, and in being so I had to use the transformer. So the good news is it powers up. The even better news is it's got the 3.5 gal inside. This will allow me to convert it to use the Lexicon LARC remote control. So time to get it on the bench. This teardown mostly went well. Unfortunately, for some reason, the rack ears were held in with these square screws, which are an absolute nightmare. I don't have a tool that's a square screwdriver, but I managed to get them off eventually. With a lot of vintage gear, you never quite know what the condition's going to be like once you open it up. It could have had a lot of work done on it to keep it alive over the years, but fortunately this was in really good condition inside. Still quite clean as well. Excellent layout here, all the analog stuff on the left, the computer in the middle, and the power supply on the far right. So let's start the teardown. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off the front panel, which is quite easy. You remove screws from the top and the bottom, and then of course the front panel just slides off. So the first thing I'm going to do is, what I do quite often, is clean the window on the front of the panel, get any scratches off that, and that way, you know, at least when I'm looking at it, it's not going to be irritating, and it's going to look a bit more fresh to begin with. So there's a lot of different things I use to clean these plastic windows, but in this case I'm using a metal polish. This is because the surface was really badly scratched. There was also a lot of pitting actually in the plastic, so I used something that was a bit more aggressive, but still works really well. So most of these cleaning products always say use on a small area first to test, and make sure that it's not going to go horrendously wrong for you by using this product. This is where I was thinking, wow, I really should have followed those instructions. As you can see, it looks like it's actually pulling the silk screen off the front of the panel, and I was a bit terrified at this moment. But fortunately enough, it's just the isopropyl interacting with the metal cleaner. So the front panel is now clean, and I'll stick it aside. The window came up really well. I'm really pleased with the way that's starting to look. So now it's time to work on the front panel. I'll try and do something about those scratches on the actual jog wheel there. I mean, they're pretty bad. One of the problems is that the jog wheel is actually made out of metal, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge. I don't want to use spray paint. So the jog wheel's held on by a screw. Taking a look with the phone, it's using one of those little Torx grub screws, so I just grabbed the right bit, and it was really easy to remove. So all of this has about 30 years worth of grime, dirt, and God knows what else all caked into it. So the best way I've found to actually get rid of that is to just throw all the buttons and knobs into a ultrasonic cleaner. So here we go, and away it goes. So now that's all clean, let's reassemble and reattach the front panel and see how we went. One of the things with the Lexicon 300 is these buttons are really easy to come off. It's one of the reasons, if you're looking on eBay or anywhere else for one of these units, that quite often at least one of the buttons is missing. I'm not sure if that's just through age or if originally they just fell off by touching it on the edge, but if you can let me know in the comments, it'd be really interesting. So you can see here what I did to restore the jog wheel. I used some sandpaper and then some metal polish again, and just polished it to a mirror finish. So now it's time to convert it from the 120 volts to Australia's 240 volts. I didn't film all of this process. I like to really stay focused when working with really high voltage, of course. So once again, it's pretty easy to do on this unit. It's designed really well. You can see there's a bottom plate that comes off and allows really easy access to the parts you need to solder. So all I had to do was move 4 wires on this board to make sure it ran on 240 volts instead of 120. And now I'm just going to hook it up to a multimeter before putting it back together to make sure the correct voltage is coming out. Cheap multimeter, I'm standing way back from it, and look at that, it's working great. So now onto the LARC controller. Now once again, this was not the greatest condition LARC, but it was fully functional. It just had a small cosmetic defect on one of the sides. And of course the LARC is probably one of the most iconic pieces of studio kit from the 80s and 90s. As such, the prices are through the roof if you can find one. So this took me a few weeks of eBay searching, and they sell really fast when they come up, so I had to jump on it straight away and probably had to pay a little more than I wanted. So obviously straight off eBay I want to test it to make sure it works. This is just a default startup test that it runs when you just plug it into power. So at the bottom left you can see the damage that's happened to the LARC. Fortunately I'm not the engineer that did this, so I didn't have to have that rather difficult conversation with the studio owner. So I'm going to be using glue, plastic putty and a few other things to fix up the corner of the LARC there. I'm going to give it a bit of a clean now, as you can see, just to make sure everything adheres properly and that I don't get halfway through the process and have to undo it all and clean it, then start again. Quick look at the internals. Believe it or not, everything there is pretty much still readily available, so if it breaks it's pretty easy to repair. So the first thing I'm doing here is gluing the edge where the plastic sort of snapped in half, and I'll set that with a clamp just to make sure it sets nicely and it gives me something really firm to work with. So now it's structurally sound, I can start filling it with plastic putty, and pretty much this first round I'll just put as much on as I can to sort of give it as much shape as possible and then sand it back. So once I've sanded it, obviously reapply putty and keep shaping it to make it look more like the other side of the LARC. So you can see here it's starting to get a lot closer to how I want it to finally look. And on this round I'm using a clothes peg with a bit of sandpaper here, just so I can really get the fine shaping of the corner. So it's time to paint. I'm just going to manually add some primer to this. and sand that back. Once that's sanded back, I'll probably add a little more primer, sand it back again, and then eventually spray paint the final product. One of the interesting things about the LARC is you can see the edge was originally spray painted, so it's not a white colour, it's a very slightly creamy yellowy colour, which was quite hard to match, but I did find something that came pretty close. And here's what it finally looks like. The paint matched up really well, like I said, and I think while the job isn't perfect, from a standard user distance, it looks pretty much unnoticeable. So the last thing to do is hook it all up, power it up. I did change the EPROMs in the Reverb off camera. This allows it to run on the LARC instead of the front panel on the Reverb. And let's have a listen to what it sounds like.